welcome aboard my train of thought. Today's train is Howard's Express. Just kidding. But yeah, for today's video, I'm gonna be talking a little or a lot, I think this video is gonna be long, about some of the book/movie franchises, series, sagas that really marked my childhood. This video idea came up because as you can tell, I'm quite a big Harry Potter fan. Also, I know that the lipstick doesn't match the look, but it's because I'm a Ravenclaw and I don't really have that much Ravenclaw merch, so this is the representation. And I really wanted to talk about Harry Potter on my channel, but I'm kind of late to the game. Like, Harry Potter has existed for such a long time that it has been talked about to death on the internet. I'll admit that. And my opinions, or the things that I have to say, are not really that new, or there are not that many hot takes. So I didn't feel like I have enough to put on a video. Therefore, I decided to kind of combine it with another two series that really made my childhood magical, Narnia and Lord of the Rings, and just tell you a little about like my story with these fantasy worlds, and a little bit about my opinions and how I eventually lost interest in those stories. I almost included Percy Jackson and the Hunger Games in this video, but first of all, the video is gonna be long as it is, and second, those two series I was more invested in when I was like in my teenage years, and the series that I'm going to be talking about in this video are like from my childhood. I discovered the first one when I was around like 5, and they have more nostalgic attachment to them than the Hunger Games and Percy Jackson. Anyways, as it has become usual in my channel, this video is divided up in sections. There's gonna be 3 of them, one for each book series. And yeah, let me just get into my nostalgia talk. This series is first because it was first in my life too. And of course, I don't think I need to say it, but the books came out way before even my parents were born. So my first introduction to Middle-earth were the Peter Jackson movies. And I must say, it was a hell of a good introduction. Those movies are amazing. And yeah, I remember my uncle had a box set with all 3 movies, and I watched them when I was way too young to even understand what was happening on screen. But for some reason, I loved them, even though they were long. And I know some people say they're boring, but for me, when I was around 5, they were the most fantastical, amazing, magical thing ever, with all the deaths and darkness. Because some of the movies, some of the scenes are very dark, and I don't mean in theme, I mean like the coloring is too dark. But anyways, so I love the movies. I also kind of became obsessed with Gollum. There was a time in my life when I wanted to talk like Gollum. And eventually I read the books, the 3 of them. I was very young. I started reading like when I was 2 years old. So I read these books when I was around 5 or 6, which is too young to be reading those books, even though they're kids' books. I don't know what I was doing reading them. And they were my introduction into the fantasy genre. And I really became obsessed with fantasy stories and fantasy creatures. And I even begged my parents to buy me any book that I could see on like bookstores or in book fairs related to fairies, trolls, goblins, dwarves, elves, any fantasy related book. And I don't even mean like fantasy stories. They were like compilation books on the history of fairies or the mythology of elves and all of that. And yeah, that was all because I became obsessed with Middle-earth. I know that the franchise right now is not as big with people my age because the movies came out when we were all pretty young and the books are way older. But I really think that they have this fantastical element that shouldn't be overlooked. And also, I must say, like, the universe is so well developed, and props to Tolkien for putting so much work into it, into developing languages, giving us the story, like the creation story in the Silmarillion, and just so much work went into this, into creating Middle Earth. And I really have to recognize Tolkien for being so dedicated to creating a whole fantasy world with even the languages. And there's so much lore out there about the Middle Earth universe, I guess, about Middle Earth in general. And it's really fun being a Lord of the Rings fan when you're like starting out, or even when you've been a fan for a long time, because there's so much information about something that you clearly really like, and you just keep rediscovering new things and getting yourself more involved into this world. And yeah, that was something that I really liked about the Lord of the Rings in general. And also the movies, like Peter Jackson did such a good job. The scenery is fantastic. Like I love New Zealand thanks to that film because the landscapes are beautiful, and the score also feels so epic and fantasy-esque. I still listen to it when I'm doing homework or when I'm reading. And yeah, they did a really good job bringing the book world into life. And I just really loved Lord of the Rings until I started kind of forgetting about it. As I said, I read the books when I was really, really young, and the movies weren't really mine, they were my uncle's. So that really made it kind of hard for me to keep revisiting the world until I eventually started forgetting things about it. And since I was really young, I wasn't really on the internet that much to be on like fan forums or anything like that. But yeah, eventually I kind of forgot a little about Middle Earth until when I was in my teenage years and the Hobbit movies were announced, and that like renewed my interest in the franchise. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. I read this book when I was a kid. So I reread it. I reread the whole trilogy, and I even read the Silmarillion, which I hadn't even read before. And I was immersed again in Middle Earth with the Hobbit, with the prospect of the Hobbit movies till they came out. And I mean, at first, when I watched the first movie, I really loved it, and I was really excited to see where they were going. I was kind of iffy about the whole decision of turning a 300-ish page book into three-hour movies, but I was like, hey, more Middle Earth for me. And that must mean that the adaptation is going to be so faithful, because there's no excuse for, oh no, we don't have the runtime to adapt this specific plot point, so we're changing it, or anything like that, because hey, you have 9 hours of runtime. You should be able to adapt like every single word from the book. But what they did was they ended up needing to add characters, and they even left out some of the things from the book. They changed some of the things. And as I said, at first, the Hobbit movies worked to renew my interest. Also, they made the dwarves hot. Like, I mean, at first, back then, I didn't even have an issue with that, because I became obsessed with Thorin, Fili, and Kili. I mean, look at them. They're beautiful. They're majestic. But looking back now, I'm like, was there even a need? Like, what was the point of making the dwarves hot? Other than giving us this love story between Kili and Toriel, which nobody asks for. And this is a grudge that I've been holding for, I don't know how many years it's been since I watched those movies, but way too many years. And that's the inclusion of Toriel. Like, there was no need for her. I mean, I'm glad that we have a strong female character. She's a badass elf, and as a character, as a standalone character, I don't have any issue with her at all. I just don't like the change that it forces onto the story by including this character, and also by including Legolas, which he wasn't in the original book, but Legolas I can forgive a little more because there's a run-in with the elves, and what's an elf that everybody will recognize from the original trilogy? Legolas, that's fine. But including Tauriel and giving her the love triangle with Legolas and Gilly, and I hated that. And so eventually the Hobbit movies were what ended up killing my love for Middle Earth, because as I said, at first they worked to renew my interest. I went to watch all of those 3 movies in theaters with my best friend, and I was, as I said, obsessed with the hot dwarves. But eventually I started realizing that it was so cash grabby, and it coupled with me growing up and realizing that most of the properties and franchises that I loved were just money-making schemes. And it just kind of lost the magic for me. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I still love the Lord of the Rings properties. Like, I can still watch the movies, even the Hobbit movies. I haven't reread the books in a long time though. But what I mean is that I'm not as big as a fan as I used to be. Like, I can't speak Kuzdul or Elvish anymore. Oh my gosh, I'm outing myself as a big nerd right now. Well, this whole video is outing myself as a big nerd. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Lord of the Rings other than I really loved it until the Hobbit movies came out. And it's like the parent of all fantasy stories, and it's the most well-developed fantasy world that I've seen in a very long time. And yeah. Now, the Chronicles of Narnia is in the middle because this is the franchise that had like the least runtime in my life. It was the last property that I became interested in, and it was the first that I lost interest in. So this section is gonna be on the shorter side. Actually, I think me losing interest in Narnia was due to them not moving forward with more of the movies, which is ironic because with Lord of the Rings I lost interest because they made like this unnecessary 3 movies about a 300-page book, and with Chronicles of Narnia I ended up losing interest because they never came up with new movies. They just stopped at the 5th book. Was it the 5th book? Yeah. Anyways, like with Lord of the Rings, these books came out way before my time. Like, so before my time. But the movie adaptation came out when I was around 5, I think. So I watched that because, as I've said, I'm a pretty big fantasy nerd. And by that time, I was already invested in Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. So I was like, oh, another fantasy world? Sign me up! And I watched it and I loved it because it was magical and it had fawns and it had this winter wonderland that turned into a beautiful spring forest, and it had everything that a kid can want. It had war, it had overthrowing the tyrannical government, it had treason, it had everything. And it was just like a great kids story at the time. So of course I watched the movies, I became obsessed, and I started bothering my parents for them to buy me the books. And they got me the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe book first, and I read it, and then for Christmas that year I got a box set with all 7 books, and I read them in like 2 weeks, I think. And I really, really enjoyed them, although I found The Horse and His Boy, or whatever the name of that one is, really boring. That was like the hardest for me to get through, but it still only took me like 2 days. My absolute favorite book from the series is The Magician's Nephew, because it's just, that's the most magical feeling book for me, at least. And I just loved the backstory of how Aslan created Narnia and all of that. Until later I found out that many people see Christian themes in this, and I don't know if it was C.S. Lewis's intentions or not, but after hearing about it, I couldn't stop seeing them everywhere. And yeah, that kind of broke the magic for me. Anyways, eventually, the 2 other movie adaptations came out, and I really enjoyed watching them. Seeing Skander Kanes grow up before my eyes really made my teenage heart throb. So yeah, the movies felt great. I loved going back to Narnia and having to keep fighting, because every time the Pevensies came back to Narnia is because there was like this very big problem, and there was this war and battle or whatever, and I found that really compelling as a kid. Although now I can see how that can be a little repetitive or boring, or I don't know. But anyways, I watched those 2 other adaptations, and then I kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And there wasn't any more movies. Until eventually I wasn't as involved in Narnia as I was when I was younger, and I lost interest, and I kind of forgot about it. It was definitely a really big part of my childhood. I can still watch the movies, like all 3 of them. I can still feel the nostalgia for those movies. Still cry when they kill Aslan in the first one, in the Stones table or whatever. Although I can't, for any reason, reread the books. They feel boring, they drag a lot for me, and I can't stop seeing the Christian allegories in all of them. So, yeah. I can still reread The Magician's Nephew. That one has stood the test of time for me. But as for the others, I find them really boring. And as I said, this one had like the shortest runtime in my life, because I started losing interest when I was around 14. And with Lord of the Rings, I was still interested until I was 16. And as I'm going to talk about in the next section, I'm still a really big Harry Potter fan, so that hasn't changed. Finally, the whole reason I made this video, like the other 2 sections were just filler. This was the biggest franchise of my childhood and of my life, as you can see by my outfit, by my necklace, by me attempting to represent Ravenclaw House with blue lipstick. Like, even my dog is named Nymphadora in honor of Tonks, because I loved Harry Potter so much. Anyways, I started loving the series when I was around 5 or 6 years old, because I watched the first 3 movies with my cousin on DVD. And yeah, we both loved them. I became obsessed. As you can tell, I was a very easily obsessed child. So I read all the books that were out back then. It was the first 6, I believe. Because I remember the 7th one came out when I was like around 9, 10. And it just became my absolute favorite fantasy world, to the point that I still want to get my Hogwarts letter. I'm still disappointed that I didn't get it. And yeah, I know that there has been a lot of criticism and a lot of talk lately of saying that millennials should let Harry Potter go. And first of all, I think I classify more as a Gen Zer. And second of all, I'm never letting Harry Potter go. Anyways, let me just get into my more prevalent thoughts on the series. I'll try not to elaborate so much on some of these points, because I think most of them are self-explanatory and they have been brought up before by other people. But yeah, these are my not so unpopular opinions on Harry Potter. I don't think that you can have many unpopular opinions when there are like so many opinions floating around about Harry Potter. I blame this series for making me so obsessed with British culture, if there's even such a thing. Like, I romanticized England so much. I thought that London was like the most magical place on earth, when I was a kid. I was obsessed with England. I wanted to live there at some point in my life. I kind of still do, but after hearing more from people living there, I'm like, oh no, everywhere is just as bad as here. Well, not as bad, but not as good as I thought it would be. Probably Harry Potter is at fault for me obsessing over One Direction years later. Hermione Granger, while not my favorite character, because I don't think I can choose like an absolute favorite character, still was a character that really helped me accept that it was okay to be the smart kid in class, and I didn't need to feel ashamed of it. And she gave me hope that I could find friends, that my smarts will be useful eventually. And I mean, I know that I'm not alone in this. I know that Hermione is many people's favorite character. It was the directors for the movie's favorite character. And I'm sure that anyone who has ever loved Harry Potter has one character that they can identify with, or if they can't identify with any character, they have this one character that just really helped them through life in some way, shape, or form. And that character is Hermione for me. So yeah, if you wanted to deduce anything about me, I think all you need to know is that I'm a Ravenclaw and I identify with Hermione Granger. I have a kind of concerning love for mischievous characters. Like, of course, Fred and George. I mean, look at this beautiful George pillow that my best friend made for me for my birthday. She has the Fred one, and I love it. And of course, the Marauders. And I know that the Marauders were bullies when they were younger, and I know that's not okay, but I don't know. I just have this image of them in my head that I can't get rid of, and they're some of my favorite characters. I root for them every time. I hate Peter Pettigrew for fucking them up. Thank you. And I would have really loved Marauders prequel over the Fantastic Beasts movies, as I'm sure many other fans would have, but we didn't get it. Prisoner of Azkaban is the absolute best film out of the 8 that they are. And it's also my favorite book. And I will not accept any other book, movie, or whatever as the superior one. It's Prisoner of Azkaban, for sure. Like, I don't know why, but I really love the fact that there wasn't much Voldemort in the 3rd year. And it was just a really great transition from the most, like, brighter, childish kind of magic world that we were seeing in the first 2 books onto the more darker ones. And I guess Goblet of Fire is also that transition, but I don't know, for me, Prisoner of Azkaban was chef's kiss. It's actually my most reread book on the series, because anytime that I have a hard time in my life, I like to reread it, and it brings me so much joy, and Prisoner of Azkaban is the best one. Period. Woof! Here's an unpopular opinion. I'm probably gonna get dragged for this one, but I actually really like everyone's hair in the Goblet of Fire. I know that everybody thinks they're a mess, but I've always really loved like the long, messy hair on anyone. I know they don't look the best, but those are my favorite hairstyles. Remus deserved to live a long, happy life with his wife and kid. For fuck's sake. And I don't think I'm alone with this one. I literally cry every time I watch Sirius die or read about it. So Order of the Phoenix is the least reread book for me, even though the whole Umbridge plot is really well done in my opinion. I just can't read it, or if I can, I stop like before the Ministry of Magic thing happens, because I can't. It makes me cry for real tears. And whenever I watch the Order of the Phoenix movie, I skip forward that scene. I can't. Ravenclaw is the most underrated house, and we deserve respect. I would have argued that it used to be Hufflepuff, but ever since Fantastic Beasts came up, Hufflepuffs have been getting everything, and us Ravenclaws are getting nothing. What do we have? We have Luna Lovegood, who is an icon, but what else do we have? This scene is great to make fun of, but it's honestly not that big of a deal. that they changed it from the book. Voldemort is kind of dumb. I personally don't think that Draco really needed a redemption arc. Actually, I really like him as a bad boy, as an unredeemed bad boy, but I would have preferred him getting one for Snape's last minute thing that he had. Speaking of which, Snape as a character is great. No argument there. But Snape as a person is not. And honestly, Harry screwed so many people over by naming his child after him and then saying he was one of the bravest men he ever knew. Like, dude! We don't talk about the play. The play didn't happen. No. Neville and Luna are precious, by themselves and together. But I kind of like that they didn't end up, like, together in the end. The movies fucked up Ron's and Ginny's characters so bad. Like, why did the director hated the Weasley so much? And yeah, I have so much more to say about the story and the characters and all of that. I could talk about Harry Potter for hours, believe me. But I'm gonna stop now because, of course, I have to address the author. I'm not really gonna get that much into it right now, because as I've said, I don't really want to touch on very serious topics, and also I myself am very conflicted on how to approach this whole thing, this whole death of the author thing. Like, the books were such a really big part of my life, and to a degree they still are, and they helped me through so much, but, you know, after knowing the author's stance on certain issues, it's difficult not to see how her biases slip into the text. And just like with Narnia and the whole Christian themes, I can't reread the books without seeing many issues pop up that I didn't notice before, but that now, and that maybe I wouldn't have noticed, but now that the author has stated some of her more problematic views, I can't ignore it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to navigate, but and I'm still not sure how I can feel about Harry Potter anymore. But for now, I'm not buying any more merch. Everything are things that I already had. Not going to the Harry Potter world anytime soon because of the pandemic, and also because I don't want to support Janine Rowling. But yeah, I don't know. I still wanted to talk about it though, because Harry Potter has been such a big part of my life that it would be weird to have a YouTube channel and not have at least one video related to Harry Potter. So yeah, I think this was quite long. So those were my thoughts on the book and movie series or franchises that really marked my childhood. I know this video was kind of more on the personal side, but I'm not gonna apologize for that. You're gonna get to know me with all of my videos in some kind of way, so let's start here. So yeah, maybe leave a like if you enjoyed this video for some reason, and also leave a comment telling me some of the properties that marked your childhood, or if you agree or disagree with anything that I said in this video, or if any of these 3 franchises were also a really big part of your childhood or life in general. I would love to know. Yeah, just anything really. Thank you so much for riding this train of thought with me. We've reached King's Cross Station, so you can hop down now. Get it? Because you take the Howard's Express on King's Cross Station? No? Okay, I'm gonna stop now, sorry.